Welcome to Great Aspirations, Wealthspire Advisors podcast series on life, wellness, and financial advice. Each episode shares the experiences of extraordinary people whose stories inspire others to think big, find balance, and explore the possibilities of achieving health, wealth, and happiness. And now, here's your host, the CEO of Wealthspire Advisors, Michael LaMena.
Welcome to the latest episode of Wealthspire's podcast, Great Aspirations. In Season 3, our topic is Life Amplified, and I couldn't be more excited to have Caroline Gaynor as my guest today. Caroline is a Vice President, Relationship Director, and Investment Specialist at Avantis Investors, responsible for building close working relationships with investment advisors. Prior to joining Avantis, Caroline was a regional director at Dimensional Fund Advisors, in the industry known as DFA. Caroline is also a sought-after public speaker who has presented at numerous events and conferences for end investor and advisor audiences. Caroline has previously held positions with BNY Mellon, Moody's Analytics, and BlackRock. Caroline earned a Bachelor of Arts in European History from Columbia University. I was an English major, so we have the atypical journey into financial services to share.
Yep.
And she holds Series 7 and 63 licenses. So, Caroline, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you so much.
Earlier today, we had the distinct honor to have you join as a keynote speaker for our 2025 Advisor Summit here in Orlando, Florida. You just shared with our advisors and guests your inspiring journey to become a guide for visually impaired triathletes. And I can say that the audience was riveted. They were locked in. Nobody was checking phones. There was absolute engagement in you taking us down the path of your journey, really working with visually impaired athletes and what it's meant for you, for them, and parallels to our industry. So maybe you could just talk a little bit about that journey that you've been on.
Absolutely. So I've been an athlete. I mean, really, high school is when I sort of came into my own, but, my family was big into sports, but I was never a talented athlete when it comes to hand-eye coordination. I was always more of an endurance athlete. But I was a collegiate rower at Columbia.
Great.
And then I stopped rowing my junior year and signed up for my first Ironman. And after I'd done one Ironman, I was like, I'm good. That's enough for me.
Okay.
But I fell into guiding after I graduated from college. And in New York, there's lots of organizations. There's some national organizations, but guiding was not super well known back in 2008 when I started. So I really, I had been doing triathlons for, 4 or 5 years. And then I was asked to guide the New York City Triathlon.
This kind of happened by accident, right? It wasn't planned?
Like most things in
Right.
life. No, I always liked the idea of having a bigger purpose.
Okay.
Absolutely. For instance, when I did my first Ironman, I fundraised for a charity that I was very involved with. But because Ironman is an inherently selfish sport, you're spending money, you're taking time away from your family and friends, and there's nothing wrong with selfish pursuits, but I really did like having a bigger purpose as part of it.
So many, many years ago, I did a half dozen marathons. It's long
Awesome.
in the rearview mirror, but it dominates your life.
It does.
The amount of time
Yes.
you're dedicating to that, evenings, weekends, mornings, to be able to prepare.
Yep. And especially in your 20s in New York, there were a lot of, 5:30 a.m. in Central Park training sessions. It was a lot. But sports has always brought a lot into my life. And then the minute I guided my first race, I was absolutely hooked.
So how did that happen? We said a little accidentally. I know you shared some stuff this morning.
I was literally sitting at my first job at a school. I remember what the computer looked like, and I got a random phone call from a friend who had a nonprofit at the time, and he was trying to bring several athletes into New York to do the New York City Tri. And he was like, "Hey, we've got one woman who doesn't have a guide. Do you know anyone that can help?" And I was already signed up for the race. The race was in a couple of weeks, or maybe
so
it was,
you're comfortable
I think it was
with
a week.
the physical aspects.
I knew the
of it.
course,
Right.
all of that. I'd never guided, but also this was last minute. I didn't know anyone else who had guided before. I hadn't. So I was like, yeah, I can do it. And just that, that saying yes. So I said yes that one day, and it completely changed my life. But I had no idea about guiding when I agreed to do it.
That's amazing. And this season's theme is all about life amplified.
Yeah.
And, I think being open to the possibilities and saying yes. The journey you've been on has been incredibly compelling. You shared that with us. but it started with that being openness, the openness to that possibility.
Absolutely.
Right?
And so many people, I think, are afraid of, letting people down or not wanting to agree to something until they have every single detail. But I think there's so many things that we can just figure out along the way. And I'm really glad. I'm so glad I said yes that day. I mean, it actually changed my life.
That's great. And we're definitely going to want to dig into that a little bit more. But, going back, I think something interesting I read about you in an article was that you didn't consider yourself a natural athlete. You talked about the hand-eye coordination. But I understand your father was a very accomplished rower.
Mm-hmm.
So how did that have an impact on you? And how did athletics play a role in your childhood and upbringing?
Absolutely. And I hope there are parents listening to this because children are watching.
Right.
They are watching what you do. And we would go down to the Schuylkill River and watch my dad, row as a masters athlete. He is an accomplished rower. He won the world championships in '74 in the men's lightweight 8. Yeah, it was amazing. But he always worked out. And that was sort of a number one non-negotiable.
And kids see that, and they're going to replicate that. So they're not necessarily going to do what you say, but they're going to
no one ever
do.
Bashed us over the head with it. It was not like you have to do this. But it's funny, I wasn't athletic, and I remember when I was going into my freshman year of high school, going for a run on the Jersey Shore, and telling my dad, "Dad, I think I'm in shape," and he was like, "No, you're not," and not in an obnoxious way, but it was just it was a fact. Like you can tell kids that they're amazing. But I wasn't in shape. I ran a half mile. So I joined the cross country team in high school, and I was thoroughly mediocre. And then it's funny, it was actually going into my junior year. So freshman year, I did okay. Sophomore year, I was solidly JV, and I didn't like it.
Okay.
So the summer between junior year and sophomore year and junior year, I ran every day. That was the difference. Some of the girls could make varsity just showing up, not running at all.
Natural ability. Yep.
I could not, but I ran every day, and I made the varsity. And that summer, I learned the value of hard work. That
discipline, work ethic to achieve
it can
a goal.
overcome so much. But no, I could not. That's why I say people scoff when they're like, "You're not a natural athlete." I've been putting in the work daily for 25 years. Right. I've been doing this a long time now, and I work out every day.
Right. And it becomes part of you.
Absolutely.
Right. So when you think about a life of purpose, meaning, fulfillment, I know from what you shared that running and competing in triathlons has become a part of your life physically, mentally, and also like the reward you get from guiding, visually impaired athletes. Yep. So one of the things that struck me when you described that this morning was you're competing in something athletic, which is a part of you, but the goal and the objective on that day has nothing to do with you. It's about the selfless sacrifice of yourself for the achievement of somebody else's goal, right? And the partnership that comes in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Although it's funny though, because I have gotten so much out of guiding that I dispute the selfless claim because it feels
you end up getting so much more, but like you're putting, it's not about your time. It's not about your goal, but you end up getting so much more. I did 6 marathons a long time ago, rearview mirror. The one I enjoyed most was the one where it wasn't about my time, the goal I was going after.
Were you running with a friend?
I was running with my wife.
Oh, even better.
And it was her first. And like she got so emotional when we got to the finish line. I got emotional.
Yes.
Differently than any of the things that were about my objective. So, much smaller example. I mean, the stuff you do is amazing, but that idea of celebrating someone else's achievement of a goal ends up giving you such reward, right?
It absolutely does. And I think anyone who's helped somebody achieve a goal, you feel that exact same thing. But it feels selfish because it is so gratifying.
That's really great. So I think one of the things that you did extremely well earlier today was take your experience, in triathlons, guiding visually impaired athletes, and compared some of the lessons learned in that, activity that is something you're passionate about to the business we're in, right? So you've chosen a career in finance. You're a relationship director and investment specialist for Avantis Investors. Talk to me about some of the parallels, in our industry and the work that you do with advisors and advisors ultimately do with end clients and how that parallels to some of the lessons you've learned through your pursuits athletically.
Well, first of all, my job is to talk about Avantis's investment philosophy and to educate advisors. But I consider myself probably the biggest cheerleader for advisors. Right. I think that it's the most important job. I personally have benefited from a relationship with an advisor. We take care of my mom who has dementia, which I did not share in the presentation,
Right.
but there is no way we could have navigated that without the help of an advisor. So I think that people don't understand what you all do and how important it is. I think a lot of people are still under the misguided impression that advisors are, picking stocks.
Right.
And the planning is what's so important. That's why I love the parallel between guiding and then what advisors do, because it's about helping people achieve goals. That's what advisors do.
They have to have the goal. You have to have
Yes.
insight into it.
Yep.
But you're along on that journey, guiding,
Absolutely.
supporting.
Yep.
I think one of the things you said is and it's also personal and individualized,
So
right?
personal.
Sometimes it's just listening. Sometimes it's being direct and blunt and getting somebody to,
Yes.
take accountability for things that they
Yep.
need to do to achieve the goals that they want.
Absolutely. I mean, advisors are like therapists in a lot of ways, but I mean, truly, and you need somebody who's not a member of your family who can look objectively. I mean, it's incredible to see what people are able to accomplish with an advisor. And I've seen it myself. I had so much anxiety around my own finances until I enlisted the help of an advisor. And I'm in this industry and I know how to invest, but I can only imagine what, people who aren't in this industry, how much support they actually need and probably don't even realize when they're navigating life.
Yeah, look, I think there's a bull market for advice while access to information has exploded.
Yeah.
It becomes so much hard for individuals to navigate and to have somebody who's going to go super deep, understand individuals and families' hopes, dreams, fears, risks, what matters most to them, and then be that partner, that guide along the journey to help them live their best life. I don't know how you can't get excited about waking up in an industry where that's what we're doing.
I mean, I do. That's the thing. I think it's not disingenuous at all. I am so excited about what advisors do. And again, in my role, I get to work with so many wonderful advisors, and that's what excites me.
That's awesome. We need to spend more time talking together about the industry. So going back to your athletic pursuits, you've logged a lot of miles, countless hours, days, weeks, months. What keeps you motivated to continue to do that work?
It's funny. I
call it work. It's not even work. It's a passion for you, right?
I always have a race on the calendar. I know that sounds insane. Actually, yesterday when I was driving here, I called my friend Randy, who I've done 2 Ironmans with.
Right.
We've been close friends for many years now. And I'm like, all right, so what race are we doing? So we're going to do the New York Marathon this year. I'm signed up for London in April as a guide. There's always something. And for me now, because the friendships I've developed through this, I mean, the women I've guided, they're like family to me.
Right.
So we pick these, it's like a race vacation.
Right.
So now it's just spending time with great friends, and it's so cool. But I always like to have something on the calendar. So I had my second child in March. So I had a baby last March. Thank you. But I already had the New York City Marathon on the calendar. So as soon as I was cleared for running, it was sort of back on a reasonable modified training plan to get me ready for it. But I just love having a goal. I think that is really helpful, and it provides structure and just gives you that lift when you don't want to get the workout in that day. It's like, well, if you don't, the race isn't going to feel quite as good.
My wife and I used to joke that some people race to train and some people train to race. And having that objective out there, like, it motivates you. Like, you've made a commitment, you're accountable to it. And if you have partners, like, one of the things that I think is interesting is when you're lining up supporting visually impaired athletes, like, there's a bond and a commitment
and
to each other,
accountability.
right?
Yes.
Right.
And I think people who, non-disabled and fully sighted athletes, they'll choose accountability partners and they'll do races together because it really works.
Right.
If you read any of the books about, motivation, accountability is, one of the number one things. And guiding is the ultimate accountability, because the last thing you want to do is let someone down in their race.
Right.
Yeah.
So I love that idea of the accountability, but it also, it strikes me that there's a blending of, the putting in the work, the accountability, that shared partnership, but also it becomes a more human activity.
Absolutely.
Because there is that element of friendship, right?
Oh, yeah.
That endures beyond just the boundaries of a race, right?
Absolutely. Oh, yes. Far beyond. Yeah.
I think one other thing, striking back to one of our previous episodes, we had a number of one of our advisors and a couple of his friends that are involved in serious mountain climbing.
Oh, wow.
And they talked about, like, the friendship and bond that comes through that suffering.
Yes.
Right? And in a race, you talked about it. You tapped into, like, it's not straight line, and there's peaks and valleys, and sometimes you're going to prop somebody else up, and sometimes you're the one that needs the propping up. So, absolutely. And life's about shared experiences. I love the idea of shared suffering, because
what are the stories that you share with your friends? It's like that time where everything went haywire, right?
Right.
I mean, that's when everything goes well, it's sort of it's not as exciting. But, and I also love that when I'm guiding, I have somebody else who has step by step done the entire race with me. So we have a shared memory of it. So I'll remember something, and then actually, frankly, all of my visually impaired friends have a better memory than I do. And they'll be like, well, yes. And do you remember this? And I remember when you said that. And it's stuff I have no recollection of, but they fully remember all these different parts of the race because we did it all together. And it's really fun.
That's amazing. And I think, life is not about just peaks, right?
No.
The human experience, the journey we're on, a life well lived, a life of purpose, meaning, and fulfillment is going to have highs. It's going to have lows. It's going to have, dark periods and periods of light. So embracing that, and I guess the microcosm is a race, like a triathlon, where you're going to go through all those.
Well, and I'll just add this: guiding got me through the darkest periods of my life when things were not going well, professionally, personally. Guiding has been the one constant in my life for the past 16 years. And I would not be where I am today if I hadn't had that not in the background. At that point, it was really the forefront of my life. But it was, if I hadn't had that as the one positive, I'm not sure what would have happened.
That's amazing. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And I love the commingling, right? You've been able to take a passion outside of work, blend it with work, right? You're now telling stories about the parallels of what you do athletically with visually impaired athletes as a guide, and drawing incredible connection to the work we do every day, with individuals and clients on the journey of living their best life. So let me ask you one final question. For you, what does a life of purpose, meaning, and fulfillment represent? What does it embody? What's part of it for you?
I think relationships are number one. I think it's obviously relationships with family and friends, and family can be chosen family. And I think it's about having a purpose that's bigger than yourself. And I always encourage people, because everyone talks about, succeeding professionally, but then how many people are sacrificing their home life or their personal passions because they're doing well professionally? I think it's really important to have balance. I can't tell you I've been the best at balance, but I love that I've had, I have my husband and my amazing children. I have a job that I love. And then the third pillar for me is this thing that's unrelated to both of those things. And I think that, life of meaning and purpose, you have to have things that fulfill you and bring you joy. And there has to be something that's kind of just for you. I know that.
You gotta carve out that space.
Yeah,
right?
You kind of have to. I think it makes
you have to be selfish to be selfless, right?
And again, I hope my daughter and my son have that in the future. Like, I really would love for them to find something. I don't care what it is. I'm not one of those people that says everyone needs to do an Ironman.
Right.
You could be, super into, reading or art or whatever it is. I don't know, video games. As long as it's something that is a passion that brings you joy, I think that's really important. And that's also how you build community. Because, going back to relationships is paramount. The community I've built through guiding has brought me more than anything I can imagine.
Well, that's amazing. How old are the kids?
So I have a 10-month-old son, and then I have an almost 6-year-old daughter.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. It goes so fast. I'm a dad of 3 daughters. One's in college. One's about to go to college. The other is in high school. It seems like just the other day, they were the age of your kids. So
it is, and it's getting harder and harder to do the long training workouts, with the young kids. But that is when you get really creative with time management.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining our Advisor Summit and sharing the experience. I know it was compelling and impactful with all of our folks. And thanks for joining this podcast as well.
Thank you.
You are definitely living a life of purpose, meaning, and fulfillment. I see the joy that you have for life. So thank you for sharing with our audience.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Great Aspirations, presented by Wealthspire Advisors, a registered investment advisor and subsidiary company of NFP Corp. If you have feedback, including suggestions for future topics and guests, contact us at clientrelations@wealthspire.com.